Hello coders, welcome to another How to Code Well Laravel tutorial. We're going to focus on the middleware again, and this time I'm going to teach you how to manipulate the request from the middleware before it gets to the controller. I'm going to demonstrate the end result, then I'm going to show you the code, and then after that I'm going to create the code from scratch. The challenge that we're going to do today is to make a request which goes to user/list. We're going to pass in a query string. In this case, it is name equals Peter. And then in our middleware, we're going to manipulate this input and change the key from name to first name whilst keeping the value. What we have here in our roots file is the root user/list. It's calling the user controller and the list method. We also are calling the middleware update user request. Let's go first into our user controller. We're echoing out the request, which in this case is user/list (name is equal to Peter), and we are simply doing a die and dump of the input. So this is the array that is output on the screen. So at this point, the input coming in is name. However, when it gets to the controller, it is now first_name. And this is controlled by our update user request middleware. And what we're doing in the handle method of the update user request middleware is we are grabbing the name from the input and assigning that to the variable first name. We're checking if it is not null. And if it isn't null, then what we're doing is we are merging a new parameter to our request, which is the first_name, and we're assigning it the value of first name. We're then removing the original name parameter from the request, and then we are returning to the closure, which goes to our controller. So if that didn't make sense, I'm going to take you through this step by step. What I'm going to do is just delete all of the things that I've added. So we're going to delete the middleware, we're going to delete the controller, and in our roots here, I'm just going to comment this out, I think, like so. And we're going to type PHP artisan make controller and then user controller. Press enter, and that's creating our controller here. So let's get into the controller file. And within the controller, let's create a public function. This is going to be our list method. And our list method will take the request. In the body of this list method, I'm going to echo the string user/list (name equals Peter), because that demonstrates the request that we're making. Then I'm going to do die and dump, or dump and die, and we're going to dump out the request input. So this is going to return us that array that we were seeing on the browser. Okay, the next thing I need to do is create ourselves the root. So let's go to the web.php here, and I'm just going to uncomment this here, and we will comment out the middleware for now. And what this is doing is generating a root at /user/list. It is calling the list method on the user controller class. To load this in a browser, type php artisan serve, and then go into the browser to the address that was given in the terminal. Here I've refreshed the page. It's going to user/list (name equals Peter), and we can see the inputs that we have. So we've got the input name, and the value of name is Peter. But what we want to do is manipulate the request before it gets into the controller, so the input actually has the key of first name instead of name, even though the query string has the name parameter in it. To do that, we need to create our middleware. So let's go back into the code. From the terminal, I'm going to create the middleware update user request by typing PHP artisan make colon middleware and then the name of the middleware that we want to create, which in this case is update user request. Okay, so that's created that file. Let's just take a look at that. So that is update user request.php, and the handle method is just the standard handle method where we are returning back to the next closure. And at this point, what we want to do is manipulate the request. So let's get that name parameter from the request. And we can do that by assigning it to the first name variable. So type first name equals and then request. And the method that we're calling upon the request object is input. We need to pass in the parameter that we want to get out. And in this case, it is going to be the name. Now, the input method will return a mixed value, and the value will be null if it doesn't exist. So we can check for that by checking if the first name is or is not null. We do that by creating an if statement. So type if, and then in the parentheses, type null, and then exclamation mark equals equals. So we're checking if it's not null, and the value that we're checking is the first name. So type first name like so. If we're in the body of this if statement, we know that we have the first name value from the name input. At this stage, what we can do is create another parameter that holds the first name value, and that parameter will be the first underscore name. And a way that we can add parameters to the request is by merging a new parameter. We do that by typing request and calling the method merge. We pass in an array where the key is going to be the new key of the parameter that we're going to create, and in this case it's going to be first underscore name, and its value will be the value of the first name. So type first name like so. At this stage, we've added a new parameter to the request. We've still got the name parameter, but we have a new parameter called first name. And I'll demonstrate that in just a second when we go back to the browser. But what we need to do, of course, is assign this middleware to the new root that we've created. So save the file and go into the web.php, and in this roots file we want to assign the update user request middleware to the user list root, and we can do that by calling the middleware method on the root, passing in an array where we have the update user request middleware like so. Let's save that. And then let's go to the browser. If we refresh the page, we can see that even though we're only supplying the name with the value of Peter as the query string, we've actually got two parameters within our request. The first one is the original with the key name and the value Peter, but the second one is the parameter that the middleware added, and that is the first underscore name key with the value of Peter. Now, in the original example I showed you, we were actually removing the name parameter from the request. So we are only left with the first underscore name parameter. We do that in the middleware. So let's go back to the code. To remove a parameter from the request, we want to use the offset unset method on the request. And we can do that within the body of this if statement. If we do that underneath the merge call here. So if we type request and we call upon the offset unset method, and we're passing in the offset or the key that we want to remove. And in this case, it is the name. Save the file and go back into the browser. When we refresh the page, we should see that the name parameter disappears, and we are left with the first underscore name parameter with the value of Peter. So this is pretty neat, right? We are manipulating the request before it actually gets to the controller. But why would we ever want to do this? Well, you may be faced with multiple requests coming in from different places, and you may want to create a standardized way of handling your requests or manipulating your requests before they go to the controller. I've also seen in the wild controllers that manipulate the request and then redirect to another controller where the request has been manipulated to conform to the other redirection. And yes, this is okay, but really what we should be doing is using these middlewares to manipulate the request outside of the controller. This means that this is more testable and more reliable. We're not hacking around with the controllers. Remember the mantra, thin controllers, fat models. So any of this logic really needs to be outside of the controller. If you found this tutorial helpful, then do let me know. Give it a thumbs up. If you've got any questions, let me know in the comment section below. I'll put the full tutorial walkthrough on howtocodewell.net. And if you haven't done so already, do subscribe to howtocodewell.net to get newsletters, tutorials, and courses as well. Happy coding, everyone, and I'll see you again in the next Laravel tutorial. Cheers.